Zero judgments. We've all done it before. That's how I justified it, out loud, to an empty room. I made sure the shower was still running, Daniel's playlist muffled behind the bathroom door, before flopping onto the bed and pulling my laptop closer. My pulse already knew the rhythm of this ritual. For the last 2 years of this relationship, this was how I warmed up. I typed it like muscle memory, Ryder Vale. And there he was. The camera loved him. The world loved him. Hell, I loved him. In the most pathetic, parasocial, please don't look at my browser history kind of way. Ryder Vale, the internet's most magnetic sin in 4K. He had that grin, the one that made you feel like he was in on your filth. Like he could see you through the screen. He started undressing, slow, teasing, deliberate. My throat went dry. I knew what came next. I'd seen this one too many times. Still, it worked every time. It always worked. This was our weird little routine. I'd watch Ryder, then I'd climb into bed with Daniel. It wasn't cheating, not technically, just bad improv. I snorted at my own thought, a perverted giggle dying in my throat. And that's when the front door opened. Click. Thud. My blood froze. Daniel's apartment was high-end, secure. Nobody just walked in. "Babe?" I called out. Nothing. Then, "Hey, sorry, didn't mean to barge in." That voice. That deep, familiar voice. For a split second, I thought the video had unpaused. I whipped around. No, the screen was paused. Ryder mid-smirk. So why the hell was his voice coming from the living room? My heart was pounding in my throat as I crept down the hall, every step heavier than the last. And then I saw him. Ryder. Freaking. Vale. Standing in my boyfriend's living room. In the flesh. Jeans, leather jacket, that stupidly perfect grin. I swear, my brain just blue-screened. And then Daniel walked out of the bathroom, towel around his neck, hair dripping, acting like this was totally normal Tuesday night programming. "Oh, hey," he said with that sheepish, boyish grin. "So, surprise, I guess. You weren't supposed to find out this way." "Find out what exactly?" "Nico, meet Ryder," Daniel said, stepping between us. "Ryder, this is my boyfriend, Nico." Ryder smiled. Lazy, electric, dangerous. "Nice to finally meet the man behind the toothbrush," I blinked. "The toothbrush?" Daniel laughed. "Yeah, Ryder's moving in next door. He's my new client. I was going to tell you tonight, I think I smiled." Maybe. Hard to tell when you're actively dissociating. And yet, under the disbelief, something pulsed, like static. Chemistry? Starstruck adrenaline? Who knows? All I knew was that it was wrong. Wrong to notice how his cologne lingered, or how he held eye contact like he'd already memorized what I looked like under better lighting. Later that night, after dinner and 1,000 awkward silences, I stood at the sink while Daniel typed away at his desk, half-dressed and already lost in his emails. I leaned down, kissed his cheek. "Come to bed." "Can't," he murmured, eyes glued to his screen. "If I stop now, I'll lose my momentum." "You always say that," I muttered. He didn't even look up. "Because it's always true." I didn't argue. I just stood there, watching him work. My boyfriend, the man I loved, chasing something I wasn't sure included me anymore. And yeah, I'll say it. I'm not proud that I fill the silence with porn, but at least I'm honest. That's what Ryder Vale was for me. Honesty in motion. Raw, unfiltered, seen. 2 months later. By the second week of Daniel signing him, Ryder Vale had officially moved in next door. Same floor, same hallway. One door away from my sanity. At first I was thrilled. Who wouldn't be? My favorite fantasy was now my neighbor. Every trip down the hall felt like a live premiere. I was convinced the universe had finally thrown me a bone, until the encounters started. They began small, innocent even. The first was in the elevator. I'd just finished grocery shopping, arms full, sweat sticking to my shirt. The doors slid open, and there he was, Ryder. Sunglasses on indoors, smelling like vanilla and sandalwood. "Need a hand?" he asked, that familiar grin curling at the edges. I mumbled something about managing fine. He didn't move, just pressed the button for my floor like he already knew it. Halfway up, one of my apples rolled out of the bag, landing near his boot. He picked it up, polished it against his thigh, and handed it back with a wink. "You drop things a lot, huh?" My brain short-circuited. My voice cracked. "Just vitamins." He chuckled. Deep. Lazy. Like he could hear my pulse thudding in my throat. Then there was the laundry room incident a few days later. I'd gone down in sweats and a hoodie, trying to look like a person who had their life. Together, he was there. Shirtless, of course, because apparently dryers were optional for gods among men. He leaned against the machine next to mine, arms folded, watching his clothes tumble. "Never thought I'd be doing laundry like a normal person," he said. "Yeah," I said, fumbling with the detergent. "Stars. They're just like us." He laughed, slow and warm. "You watch my stuff, huh?" I froze mid-pour. "What?" He shrugged, grin never fading. "Your face." You looked like you recognized the abs. If there was a trapdoor, I'd have gladly fallen through it that day. Then there were the hallway run-ins. Him coming home from a shoot, smelling exotic. He'd catch my eye and say things like, "Long day, huh?" Or, "Don't stay up too late. You look like someone who dreams too hard." Every time, I'd laugh it off. Every time, it lingered longer than it should have. Ryder had this way of looking at you, like he was still performing, even when he wasn't. Like he knew the camera was still rolling somewhere, and you were the only other actor in the scene. And Daniel? Daniel was probably trying to break the world record for ignoring his boyfriend. I wanted to be mad, but how could I? He was busy, actually busy, managing Ryder's schedule, booking shoots, negotiating contracts. The man was living his career dream. And yet, it didn't justify coming home late and falling asleep mid-conversation, or the way his phone lit up with Ryder's name more than mine. Most days, I told myself it was fine. That love looked like patience, that this was just a rough patch. Other days, I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if Daniel was tired of me. Or worse, if I'd simply stopped exciting him. I wanted to ask. God, I wanted to ask. But I knew once the can of worms was opened, there'd be no closing it. So I stayed quiet. 3 days later, the knock came just after midnight. Deliberate, 3 taps, no hesitation. The kind of knock that said, "I know you're awake." Daniel was in the living room, phone glued to his ear, pacing and mumbling logistics in that calm, managerial tone that made me want to throw something. When the knocking didn't stop, he waved me over, half distracted. "Babe, could you get that? It's probably Ryder. His internet's been acting up all week." I blinked. "You sure he's not just watching?" "Please," Daniel mouthed, and turned back to his call. Right. Midnight IT support. My favorite. I opened the door to find Ryder leaning on the frame, one hand in his sweatpants pocket, the other holding his phone. Barefoot, hair messy, shirt just a little too thin. "Hey," he said, voice low and lazy. "Hate to bug you this late, but my Wi-Fi's dead. Thought maybe your genius boyfriend could save me, but he's kinda busy." His eyes flicked past me, toward Daniel pacing inside. "So, guess that makes you my hero tonight." I swallowed. "Sure, fine." Lead the way. His apartment was a mirror of Daniel's, except lived in. Softer lighting, a faint smell of tobacco and cologne, half a script open on the coffee table. Ryder dropped onto the couch and gestured towards the router in the corner, like it had personally betrayed him. There it is. Dead as my social life, I crouched beside it, tracing cables, pretending like the air between us wasn't humming. "You know," I said, "you could have just unplugged something." He tilted his head, smirk curling. Could I? Maybe you should come check, I did. Eventually found the problem. The Ethernet cable had been yanked out completely, and the router fried. Your router's toast, I said, standing up. And this cable didn't just fall out. He whistled, hands up in mock surrender. Must have been the cat. I turned to him slowly. You don't have a cat. He grinned wider. Guess I should get one then. My brain screamed leave, but my feet didn't listen. For a second too long, I stood there, close enough to smell the warmth of his skin, the faint mix of mint and smoke. You always work this hard to fix things that aren't yours? He asked. Only when they won't stop bothering me, I muttered. He laughed, low and rough. You sure that's what I'm doing? I didn't answer. Couldn't. I just grabbed my phone, mumbled something about calling the building's IT in the morning, and escaped back to my apartment before my body could betray me. Daniel was still on the phone. Didn't even glance up. 1 month later, somehow the chaos had mellowed. I wasn't flinching every time Ryder smirked, and he wasn't hell-bent on making me short-circuit with every word out of his mouth. We'd found a rhythm, something dangerously close to friendship. These days, we actually talked about movies, music, food, the absurdity of LA rent. Sometimes he'd drop by my place with takeout. Other times, I'd find myself at his apartment, pretending I didn't notice how good he smelled when he passed me a beer. One Saturday, Daniel suggested a movie marathon. We should all hang out for once, he'd said. And honestly, I'd been excited about that idea. The three of us, normal, domestic, uncomplicated. We made it halfway through the second film before Daniel's phone started buzzing nonstop. Crap, he muttered, already getting up. Client thing. I've got to take this. Of course he did. He promised he'd be back before the finale. He wasn't. So it was just Ryder and me, couch cushions and popcorn between us, watching explosions and bad one-liners like we hadn't spent months tiptoeing around invisible lines. And it was good. Easy. We argued about the best film in the series, traded trivia, finished each other's jokes. He didn't flirt, and I didn't stammer. Just two nerds geeking out. For the first time in months, I forgot about the tension, the what-ifs, the guilt. When Daniel finally came back, the credits were rolling. Ryder was laughing at something I said, head tipped back, grin wide enough to make the room brighter. Daniel stood there for a moment, just watching us. Then, as Ryder left, he asked, casual but not really, "What were you two talking about?" I shrugged, keeping my voice light. Ryder's a super fan. Like me, he hummed something that didn't sound convinced, kissed my temple, and went to shower. But later, lying in bed beside him, I could feel it, his distance, the weight of his silence. And that was when it hit me. Daniel had finally noticed the tension too. 1 week later, I didn't realize how bad things had gotten until a week later. Dinner was simple. Roasted chicken, veggies, 3 plates, always 3. Because Tuesday nights meant Ryder. I was setting the last fork when Daniel walked in, loosening his tie. He paused, brow furrowing. "What's with all the food?" "It's Tuesday," I said, like it should have been obvious. "You always invite Ryder over." He blinked, then frowned. "Yeah, well, I didn't mention it today, did I?" Something in his tone, sharp, defensive, made me straighten. "Okay, but you always do." He shrugged, sitting at the counter. "Maybe I didn't feel like it this week." That hit harder than it should have. "Since when do you not feel like it? You've spent half this month at his place, and he spent the other half here, Daniel. Forgive me for assuming dinner was part of the job description." His jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, setting the dish down a little too hard. "I'm being consistent. Someone has to be." He stood, eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm here. Every damn day. Cooking, cleaning, pretending we're okay while you run around managing everyone else's lives, but can't be bothered to check in on your own boyfriend." "Wow," he muttered, scoffing. "You really think that's fair?" Fair! I barked out a bitter laugh. You want fair? Try being in love with someone who's never really here anymore. That cracked something. He opened his mouth to reply, voice rising, and then, knock, knock. Both of us froze. Hey. Ryder's voice came through the door, tentative. Everything okay in there? Sounded intense. Daniel shot me a look, the kind that screamed, don't make a scene. Too late. I grabbed my jacket. I need air. Nico? Daniel started, stepping forward. But I was already at the door, brushing past Ryder's worried expression, past the smell of dinner cooling on the counter. The next morning, I wasn't expecting company. Just a walk to the dumpster with 2 bags of last night's disaster. Then I heard it. Sneakers hitting pavement, the low thump of bass leaking from earbuds. Ryder Vale, shirt damp with sweat, sunlight catching on his skin like it had a personal vendetta against my self-control. He slowed when he saw me, tugging one earbud out. Morning. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual and not like my heart had done a triple backflip. Early run? Always. He stretched, grin lazy. Helps clear my head. Especially after getting dumped by my manager. That made me blink. Wait, Daniel? Yep. He said it like it was a grocery list item. Cited creative differences. Creative differences? I repeated. You mean my boyfriend? Ex-manager, he corrected, shrugging. Don't worry, it wasn't your fault. Just wasn't working, I guess. I hesitated. Still, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cost you. He cut me off with a small wave. Don't sweat it. I'm not mad, and hey, who knows? Maybe you can talk some sense into him? Yeah, I muttered, half laughing. That'd be great. If he'd actually listened for a second, neither of us spoke. The morning air sat thick between us, humming with something unsaid. Then Ryder tilted his head, smirk returning. Coffee? My, treat you look like you could use it tempting. Too tempting. But I glanced at my watch. Rain check. I've got a meeting in less than an hour. He mock-pouted. Workaholic. Look who's talking. Ryder chuckled, stepping past me. Next time then. Morales. Don't make me chase you. Later that evening. By the time Daniel got home, the apartment smelled like garlic and smoke. I'd tried to cook something nice. Keyword, tried. He dropped his keys in the bowl, loosened his tie, and gave me that tired half smile that used to melt me. Smells good, he said, voice flat. Translation, don't start. I set his plate down. Figured we could try dinner again. He nodded, distracted, scrolling through his phone as he sat. I waited until halfway through the meal before dropping it. So, I said, spearing a piece of overcooked chicken. You and Ryder. His fork froze midair. What about him? I ran into him this morning, I said lightly, like the air hadn't already started to thicken. He told me you dropped him as a client. Daniel's eyes snapped up, sharp. You talked to him? Yeah, he lives next door, Daniel. We bump into each other. That's not what I asked, he said, voice tightening. I blinked. What? Am I supposed to pretend he's invisible now? You know what he does, Nico, Daniel snapped, pushing his plate away. You know the kind of people he attracts. You shouldn't even... Shouldn't even what? I cut in, heat flaring in my chest. Talk to a human being? Jesus, Daniel, you're not my handler. His chair scraped back hard. Don't twist this into something it's not. Then what the hell is it? I fired back. You drag him into our lives, make him your client, let him move in next door, and now suddenly I'm not allowed to talk to him. Daniel stood, jaw tight, color rising to his face. You don't get it. Ryder's a mess. He's reckless. He'll drag you into his chaos if you let him. I laughed, short, bitter. You mean our chaos? Because newsflash, Daniel, you already did that. You made him part of this, not me. His eyes flashed, and something in him snapped. You're obsessed with him. That hit like a slap. Excuse me? Every time I look at you, you're talking about him, thinking about him. Hell, you probably... He stopped himself, but the implication burned hot between us. I stood too, chair legs screeching. You don't get to project your own paranoia onto me. I'm not the one who brought him into our home. The silence that followed was brutal, the kind that buzzes in your ears, but I grit my teeth through it and finished my meal. Why? Well, because my cooking was bloody delicious, and because I skipped dinner last night. By the time I was done cleaning up, I grabbed my jacket. I'm heading out. Nico! But there was no changing my mind. 1 hour later, the bar was dim, sticky, and blessedly anonymous. A dive that smelled like whiskey and second chances. I told myself I was only staying for 1 drink. That was 3 drinks ago. The ice in my glass had melted to nothing, and the bartender had stopped pretending not to judge me. I was mid-sip when the stool beside me scraped back. Rough night? That voice, smooth, low, and laced with something that made my stomach drop. I didn't have to look. I knew. Ryder Vale. Of course, the universe couldn't even give me 1 night off. He slid onto the stool beside me, in a black hoodie and a cap that did a laughably bad job of hiding him. The kind of casual disguise that screamed, "Look at me, but don't say my name." "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying for irritation, but landing somewhere between disbelief and relief. He grinned. "Same thing you are, apparently. Avoiding reality." I huffed a laugh. "How's that going for you?" He lifted his glass. "Moderately well." Until I ran into you. Our eyes met, and something burned there. Something reckless. The kind of spark you feel deep in your chest before your brain has a chance to name it. We talked. About nothing, then about everything. He was shockingly grounded for someone whose job description was, well, you know. He talked about how fame stripped away privacy, how intimacy became choreography. I talked about Daniel, or the ghost of what we used to be. Ryder's jaw flexed. He didn't look away. "You deserve to be wanted." Not tolerated. My laugh came out soft, bitter. "You make it sound simple." He leaned in a little, voice dropping low. "It is simple. People complicate it because they're afraid of being honest." A pause. His knee brushed mine under the bar. Deliberate or not, I didn't know. When I looked up, we were too close. The noise of the bar fell away. The light caught in his eyes, and for one dizzying heartbeat, I thought I'd let it happen. Let us happen. And then, "I can't." "You still love him," Ryder said. Finally. It wasn't a question. I stared into my glass. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I do. Even when it doesn't feel like he loves me back, it came out rough, almost a whisper. Things are bad, yeah, but I still love him, and I can't do that to him." Ryder froze. Then he nodded, slow, like he'd expected it. "Yeah, that's fair." He leaned back, the spell breaking, the space between us filled with the sound of clinking glasses and bad music again. "I get it," he said after a beat, softer this time. "If it helps, I wasn't gonna push you. Just wanted to see if the spark was real." It was, I admitted. That earned me a grin. Small, genuine, a little sad. He clinked his glass against mine. "Then maybe that's enough." We spent the rest of the night talking. No flirting, no pretending. Just 2 tired men trading stories in the half-light of a dying bar. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. 2 hours later, by the time the cab pulled up outside Daniel's building, the buzz from the whiskey had faded, replaced by the kind of dread that sits heavy in your gut. Ryder paid the driver before I could argue. Of course he did. And when I looked up, there he was. Daniel, leaning against the front door like a bad omen in a perfectly ironed shirt. Arms crossed, jaw tight. His eyes found me, then flicked to Ryder. Whatever warmth they used to have, gone. Ryder gave a polite nod, murmured a "night man," and slipped inside his own apartment next door. Smart man. That left me with Daniel, and silence sharp enough to cut glass. He didn't say a word until we were inside. The door shut with a quiet click, and that was it. The signal flare. "So," he started, voice too calm, too even. "You went out with him?" I blinked, already exhausted. "No, I didn't go out with him. I ran into him. At the bar, ran into him," he repeated, like he was tasting the words for lies. "That's awfully convenient, don't you think?" I groaned, rubbing my temples. "Daniel, please don't start this again." "Start what, Nico?" His voice cracked, anger finally bleeding through. "You disappear half the night. You show up with him. And I'm supposed to believe it's all just bad timing?" I met his stare. "Nothing happened." "You'd know if you still trusted me," that landed like a slap. His jaw tightened, eyes going glassy, and for a heartbeat, I thought he'd break. Instead, he laughed, low, bitter, tired. "Maybe that's the problem, Nico," he said quietly. "Maybe we just need some space, a break. I don't think we should be in the same house right now." My mouth went dry. "You're serious?" "Yeah." He didn't look at me when he said it. "I am." I wanted to argue, to tell him that I didn't mean for any of this to happen, that I was still his even when I didn't know how to prove it. But the words didn't come. They just died on my tongue. He turned away first, heading for the bedroom, leaving me standing in the living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of everything we'd built together. 1 month later. 1 month. That's how long it had been since Daniel and I pressed pause. And you know what? I was surviving. Hell, thriving. I had moved back to my apartment, and the first few nights alone were brutal. The bed felt too big, the apartment too quiet, the silence too honest. But somewhere between eating takeout straight from the carton and learning that I could in fact assemble IKEA furniture solo, something shifted. I'd stopped living in twos. Every choice, every thought, every meal, just mine again. I even started writing again. Nothing worth posting yet, just messy half-poems and rants that wouldn't see daylight. But it was something. A spark I hadn't felt in years. Did I miss Daniel? Of course. We'd been together since high school. You don't just uninstall that kind of history, but missing him wasn't the same as needing him. And for the first time in forever, I liked the version of me that existed without him. As for Ryder, radio silence. I couldn't in good conscience keep texting him, not until I had sorted out my mess. Plus, it turns out when you don't live across the hall from someone, it's actually pretty easy not to accidentally bump into them half naked. Ryder still lived in Daniel's building, and he was doing well enough. I saw the headlines, but our worlds had drifted back into their proper orbit now. And that was good. Because this break, this tiny, unexpected slice of solitude, wasn't about him. Or Daniel. It was about me finally remembering what it felt like to take up all my own space and be my own person. 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later, it started with a note. A real, handwritten note. In 2025. In my actual mailbox. For a second, I thought it was a flyer, or maybe one of those passive-aggressive letters from building management. About trash disposal etiquette. But no, it was a poem. Short, barely 6 lines. The handwriting was neat, careful, familiar in a way that hit me right in the gut. I didn't get it at first. Then the next day, another one came. And then another. By letter 3, I knew. Daniel. They were our poems. The ones we used to write for each other back in high school, scrawled on loose-leaf paper, folded into ridiculous origami hearts, passed under desks when we thought the teachers weren't looking. I could almost see the old ink stains on his fingers, smell the cheap cologne he used to drown himself in. The latest note had come with a short letter. Found our old box of stuff in the attic. You were right. I really did keep everything. Reading them felt like time travel. Hope you're doing okay. And just like that, waterworks. Because back then, letters were our thing. When we couldn't say it out loud, we wrote it. When we fought, we wrote it. When we were stupidly, hopelessly in love, we wrote it. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to. God, I wanted to. But because our problem had never been about words. It wasn't about grand gestures or nostalgia or who could write the prettier stanza. It was about the space between us, the silence, the slow drift we both ignored. But Daniel didn't stop. Every day for the next month, a new envelope waited in my mailbox. Poems, memories, sometimes just single lines that only I would understand. It was relentless, stubborn him. And even though I told myself it didn't mean anything, that I wasn't going to fall for this, every time I saw his handwriting, my chest ached in that familiar, traitorous way. 1 week later, it started small. A reply here, a stanza there, the few poems I still remembered. I told myself it was harmless, just nostalgia. But once you start writing to Daniel Hart, stopping isn't easy. The letters became a rhythm. His in the morning, mine at night. Poems, scraps, half-thoughts only we'd understand. It felt easy again, like remembering an old song. Then came the curveball. Want to grab a coffee sometime? Just talk plain paper. No flourish, just that. I stared at it for hours. Wanted to say yes, but fear's a hell of a drug. So I didn't reply, not that day, not the next. By the third, I told myself silence was safer. On the fourth, I went to the bar. No plan, just escape. And of course, fate being fate, there he was. Ryder Vale. 2 stools down, beer in hand, temptation personified. Nico, he said smiling, you look better. Less haunted, I laughed. Guess I've been working on it. He nodded. This bar's kind of my haunt now. Was hoping I'd run into you. We talked, joked, drank. The easy kind of quiet that sneaks up on you. Then, inevitably, Daniel's name came up. I told him about the letters, the poems, the coffee I couldn't bring myself to answer. He whistled. Jealous as hell, he said. But that's beautiful. Beautiful, I scoffed. It's a mess. Yeah, he said softly. But it's your mess. When I asked what he'd do, he just shrugged. If I loved someone, really loved them, and had even a sliver of a chance to fix it, I'd take it. It landed like a punch. When we stood to leave, I hugged him, quick, instinctive. He held on a beat longer, then smiled. Go get your boy, Morales, he said quietly. I'm rooting for you. 2 days later, we met 2 days later. It was supposed to be coffee, quick, casual. But the second I saw him standing in the park, cup in hand, hair longer, a little stubble on his jaw, it hit me like a punch to the chest. God, I'd missed him. He smiled, small and unsure. Hey yourself, I said, pretending my heart wasn't trying to climb out of my throat. We started safe, work, weather, the cafe's overpriced pastries. Polite, careful, like walking barefoot over glass. But eventually the truth crept in. Daniel set his cup down. I owe you an apology. For the space? For everything. He sighed. I handled it like an idiot. I got scared, insecure, and instead of fixing things, I ran. Then Ryder showed up, said his piece, told me everything, start to finish. That caught me off guard. He did? Daniel nodded. Yeah, turns out he's a better man than I thought. Silence. Heavy, but not empty. I'm still hurt, I said finally. You made me feel like a problem you didn't want to solve. I know. His voice cracked a little. I let work dictate everything. Let routine kill what we had. And seeing you with Ryder, seeing how easy it was for you to laugh with him, it gutted me. Because that used to be me. I didn't respond. Just let him sit with it. After a moment, he straightened, nervous smile tugging at his lips. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just maybe a chance? One date. To see if there's still something left to. Fight for. I hesitated, heartbeat roaring in my ears. Then, maybe out of hope, maybe out of madness, I nodded. One date? His grin broke wide, boyish, familiar. Perfect. How about right now? He held out his hand. I stared at it, the same hand I'd held 100 times before. And then I took it. 2 hours later. Nothing could have prepared me for what Daniel had planned. When I woke from a short nap in his car, he was already outside, standing under the flickering neon sign of the old diner where we'd had our very first date in high school. Cracked tiles, burnt pie smell, same buzzing light. He smiled when he saw me stir. Déjà vu? More like time travel, I said. Dinner was easy. The food still tasted like regret and grease, but the laughter came natural. For the first time in forever, we weren't performing. We were just us again. Two idiots who once swore forever over a shared milkshake. Afterward, we walked with no destination. Just drifting, like we used to. When we finally reached his building, neither of us wanted to say goodbye. Daniel broke the silence first. I felt you slipping away long before Ryder showed up, he said quietly. I just didn't know how to stop it. So I hid in work. Told myself it was for us, I exhaled. Half a laugh, half a sigh. And I kept pretending I was fine, when I wasn't. I was scared if I said it out loud. It'd make it real. He nodded, eyes glassy in the streetlight. We really did mess this up, huh? Spectacularly. That made us both laugh, the kind that cracks through tears. We talked until the words blurred together, about fear, pride, how easy it is to love someone and still lose them in the noise. And when there was nothing left to say, silence filled the space between us. Warm this time. Familiar. He stepped closer. I missed you. My pulse jumped. Then show me. He did. The kiss was slow at first, hesitant. Then it broke open into something raw and hungry and painfully familiar. Two people relearning the shape of each other. By the time we pulled back, breathless, we were in the hallway outside his apartment. The same one I'd stormed out of months ago. Now, it felt different. Lighter. He rested his forehead against mine. So, does this mean we're trying again? I smiled. Feels like we already are. And when he kissed me again, everything, the ache, the noise, the months apart, finally went quiet. Conclusion. Months later, things weren't perfect, but they were ours. Daniel and I had started therapy. We were still together, still messy, but stronger for it. We talked more, listened better. Some days, that was enough. Ryder was thriving too, producing his own films, the kind with heart instead of pretense. In one interview, he'd even called Daniel and me his inspiration. I laughed when I saw it, because maybe, in some strange, roundabout way, we'd all saved each other. The end. What would you do when you realize the flame in your relationship is fading fast? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to become part of our Rainbow Force, and consider joining our membership for early access and exclusive content. Stay wholesome.